There you go. Hello there. Today's video is about Iroquoian pictograph writing. This is a sadly under-researched subject. The majority of my information comes from a single pamphlet included in part of the book Tales of the Iroquois. The pamphlet was originally published in Akwesasne in the 50s. It was compiled by a fellow called Ray Fadden, who also did much of the research. The pamphlet isn't very long, so I will read it to you in its entirety. Picture writing is a means of expressing thoughts or recording events by marks or drawings. An understanding of Iroquois or Six Nations customs, dress, history, culture, language, and tradition is necessary for the understanding of these pictographic signs. The symbols and signs given in this pamphlet are, in most cases, both ancient and modern Six Nation origin. Some of the more ancient signs were secured from wampum belts, pictographs found in the bark dishes, condolence canes, rock writings, beadwork, and designs recorded in the writings of early missionaries and explorers who traveled among the Iroquois. In some cases, where a design was thought lacking, a general Indian design taken from the most important known pictographs of the North American native peoples has been used. The designs collected and illustrated in this pamphlet have required a great deal of effort, thought, and research, because the sources of information are very scarce. From legends and traditions handed down to the young Iroquois today, it is known that the old ones among the Iroquois had an elaborate system of pictograph writing. Each bark cabin had its painted clan symbol over the entrance. Records of the happenings and exploits of the Iroquois were painted within the bark houses. Bark was often stripped from the tree upon which record paintings of events were made on the whitened wood. In some cases, a post was erected in the village for the same purpose. In every town of the Six Nations, the war chief erected a war post. Upon this post, events were recorded. Many of these memorial posts have been mentioned in the writings of the early explorers. In the Moravian journals and the Jesuit relations, picture writing of the Iroquois are often mentioned. The following quotations are examples of this. Quotation: "Though they are ignorant of the art of reading and writing, yet their ancestors were well aware that they were in need of something to enable them to convey their ideas to a distant nation, or to preserve the memory of remarkable events. To this end, they invented something like hieroglyphics and also strings and belts of wampum. Their hieroglyphics are characteristic figures which are more frequently painted upon trees than cut in stone. They are intended either to caution against danger, to mark a place of safety, to direct the wanderer onto the right path, to record a remarkable transaction, or to commemorate the deeds and achievements of their celebrated heroes, and are as intelligible to them as a written account is to us." End quotation. Again, quotation: "The warriors sometimes paint their own deeds and adventures. Other paintings point out the places where a company of Indians have been hunting, showing the nights they have spent there, the number of deer, bear, etc. killed during the hunt, etc. If even a party of traveling Indians have spent but one night in the woods, it may be easily known, not only by the structure of their sleeping hut, but by their marks on the trees, to what tribe they belonged, for they always leave a mark." End quotation. The Honorable Cadwallader Colden, a colonial governor of New York, wrote in his History of the Five Nations about the war parties of the Iroquois, saying that after traveling about 3 or 4 miles from the village, quotation, "They always peel a large piece of bark from some great tree. They commonly choose an oak as the most lasting. Upon the smooth side of this wood they, with the red paint, draw 1 or more canoes going from home, with the number of men in them paddling which go upon the expedition, and some animal, as a deer or a fox. An emblem of the nation against which the expedition is designed is painted at the head of the canoes, for they always travel in canoes along the river, which lead into the country against which the expedition is designed as far as they can. After the expedition is over, they stop at the same place on their return. They represent on the same or some tree near it the event of the enterprise. And now the canoes are painted with their heads turned towards the town. The number of the enemy killed is represented by scalps painted black, and the number of prisoners by as many withes, and with which they usually pinion their captives. These trees are the annals, or rather trophies, of the Five Nations. I have seen many of them, and by them and their war songs they preserve the history of their great achievements." End quotation. Thus concludes the text of the pamphlet. This pamphlet represents the bulk of the work that has been done on the subject. In conducting my own research, I was able to find no serious academic work on the subject, and the only primary sources I could find besides these contributed nothing to what has already been described. On occasion, I've stumbled across some historian or other who in an unrelated work mentions the pictograph writing in passing. The bulk of these mentions can be caricatured thus. This is a fascinating subject, and someone who isn't me should dedicate a lot of time to studying it. I take a dig at the historians, but I suppose I'm no better. Unfortunately, I think the time for a comprehensive study of Iroquois pictograph writing has long since passed. Very few examples of it have survived to the present day. The common mediums of bark, wooden posts, and animal skins obviously do not survive well. Compounding this is the fact that every Iroquoian village was razed to the ground at some point in history, either during the Beaver Wars or else the American Revolution. In my research, I was able to find only 3 surviving examples. Due to internet nonsense, I am unable to share these images with you. One was a simple hunting record, "Oh, I caught 2 beavers and a deer." Another was a representation of a condolence ceremony. The third was incomprehensible and might not have been related to the Iroquois at all. I think the time for a comprehensive study of the pictograph writing was in the late 1600s, early 1700s, back when there was still material to work with. Besides the scarcity of surviving examples, there are not very many people left who might have some knowledge key to deciphering the symbols. There aren't very many people left from before the residential school era. This is an image by the Jesuit missionary Pierre Joseph Marie Chamonix. It is a demonstration of pictograph writing. At the top we see 8 of the clan animals mustered for war. On the left, a war canoe with 8 paddles. On the right we see 3 men killed. On the bottom left we see a man carrying 2 scalps and another escorting a prisoner. On the bottom center we see bear and beaver carrying a wampum, perhaps in council. On the bottom right we see bear and turtle sharing a fire. One question I have is how standardized it was. Did each community have their own variations? Did each nation have their own variations, etc.? I think it's likely that many of them were standardized, but many others were made up on the fly. This leads into another question of whether it should be considered a writing system or a mnemonic device. I would place it halfway. The variety of symbols allows you to communicate with a great deal more clarity than a pure mnemonic device such as a wampum belt. However, the lack of grammatical symbols places a limit on comprehension. The Jesuit example demonstrates this quite well. Unlike pure mnemonic devices, even without the original explanation, we are able to extract some meaning from this image. But, in the absence of grammatical symbols, we are unable to extract everything that the author intended. You can get something without explanation, but you need explanation if you want to get everything. Hence, half writing, half mnemonics. I find it interesting to think of what the pictograph writing might have told us if more of it had survived. It might perhaps be overly idealistic for me to imagine some arcane bits of knowledge, a comprehensive history from the Iroquoian perspective. Likely most of it would just be hunting records, war records, and marriage records. Nevertheless, the mundane artifacts like that can be invaluable to the historian and archaeologist. It's a shame that all we have is this pamphlet, but I'm grateful for it and to those who compiled it. I hope you found this interesting. Thank you for watching.